I'm Joe Lample. When I created Growing a Greener World, I had one goal: to tell stories of everyday people, innovators, entrepreneurs, forward-thinking leaders who are all, in ways both big and small, dedicated to organic gardening and farming, lightening our footprint, conserving vital resources, protecting natural habitats, making a tangible difference for us all. They're real, they're passionate, they're all around us. They're the game changers who are literally growing a greener world and inspiring the rest of us to do the same. Growing a Greener World, it's more than a movement, it's our mission. Ten years ago, Growing a Greener World got its start right here at Greensgrove Farms, founded by Mary Seton Corboy. It's just outside of downtown Philadelphia. And at the time, we were shooting our pilot here. We didn't have a show, but we had an idea. And Greensgrove Farms was the best thing that we knew of at the time that represented a lot of what we thought Growing a Greener World would stand for in all the episodes that we would produce in the future, if we became a series. Well, we did. And we've covered a lot of ground since then, almost 200 episodes. But we keep coming back to this ground and this special place and the legacy that Mary Seton Corboy started. 5 years ago, we were back for its 15th anniversary. It was awesome. And now we're back for its 20th anniversary. But you know what? This time, it's a little bittersweet because there's one person in this story that's not with us anymore. And that's Mary Seton Corboy, its founder. And if you talk to anybody that knows and loves Mary, the first thing they'll tell you is she was a fighter and there was never a challenge that she wouldn't take on head on. And she almost always won. But this last battle, the one she'd been fighting for the longest, cancer, she finally lost it last year. But she gave it one heck of a run for its money. So as we come back today, we're here to celebrate the legacy that Mary left and all the things that everyone around her that knows her and loves her want to see continued. And that's what we look forward to bringing to you today. Greensgrove has become a mainstay of the Philadelphia neighborhood of Kensington. The seeds of this place were first sown here in 1997. And while Greensgrove would prove to be one of the leaders of what turned out to be a much larger urban farming movement across the country, it was debatable at first whether anything would grow here at all. Even to co-founder Mary Seton Corboy, who, a decade later, still seemed a little shocked that her idea took root. Mary, 10 years ago, you're looking at this abandoned piece of property in downtown Philadelphia, basically an industrial brownfield.
Yeah.
And you're thinking urban farming. What's going through your mind?
Obviously not enough. There was a lot of thinking that should have happened that didn't happen. And ironically, that has been one of the reasons that we've been able to succeed, I think, is that we didn't have such a concrete idea, no pun intended, in our head of what an urban farm was going to look like, because there weren't any urban farms for us to look at for a guide.
Yeah.
So we kind of had to invent what we were doing from the start, and it's, you know, we've had some success and we're happy about where we are right now. We're here, that's the most important thing.
And you've come a long way, but once you decide to get into this concept of urban farming, you don't just come and plant into the soil that's here, because basically this soil was rather contaminated when you found it.
That's right. This was a brownfield, an EPA Superfund site, so there really wasn't any soil. We had to bring all of the soil onto the site later. When we started just as a hydroponics commercial operation where we sold only to restaurants in Philadelphia. So there really wasn't this retail component. There wasn't the growing all of the different vegetables and the flowers component when we got started. That's been part of the evolution of Greensgrove.
But now, fast forward, and we've got this full service garden center that's serving, you know, an urban community. Talk about how that really impacts the people in this area.
I think the lessons that we're putting out there about sustainability and growing and grow your own food and everything can be lost if there's not the simple entry point, the access point to what that's all about. And in our cases, case here in Philadelphia, we had a whole city with no garden center in the middle of it all. There's exactly 2 nurseries in all of Philadelphia. So there was really a demand. We met people who were saying, I love to garden, but I can't get my hands on this, that, or the other thing. And we had an opportunity to build a greenhouse and said, let's go in a different direction, extend our own season, and get into the nursery business. Something about which I knew absolutely nothing whatsoever. But like anything, I figure if I can learn it, then everybody else can.
And the locals did learn. From the simple things like flowers for the front stoop and fresh vegetables from the farmer's market, to the lesser-known techniques that Mary and her staff introduced to the farm. Green roof technology, rain barrels, making their own biodiesel for the delivery trucks, raising bees for on-site pollination and honey production. These practices have all become staples of green living now, but at the time, they were practically foreign concepts in an urban setting like this. By the 15th anniversary, Mary and her staff were still coming up with new and innovative ways to serve Philadelphia's inner-city neighborhoods. Right around the time the food truck craze was sweeping the nation, Greensgrow was doing it with fresh, locally grown produce and their mobile markets.
There's no grocery stores at all in some of these areas, and so there's a need for fresh food, but it has to be approached by somebody who's not trying to shove things down other people's throat. And Greensgrow, if nothing, has always been that. We try to go with the flow. We're not political about what we're doing. We're not standing there saying we're better because we're local. We're just saying this is an option, and it's an option that we think is going to afford you a better lifestyle.
We were along for the ride as 2 trucks roamed West Philadelphia and Camden, New Jersey, just across the river, hitting a regular rotation of stops where locals could visit the truck and shop for fresh produce. Mary tapped Ryan Cook, a longtime Greensgrow employee, to spearhead the mobile market project.
So in the morning we go to a senior center, and the West Philadelphia Senior Community Center is really where we started. I mean, when we were a pushcart market, seniors were the people that came to us and said, hey, we want this produce, come here. And so that's really our core, and that's what we view as our really central demographic. And they're sitting there waiting on the sidewalk when we pull up, and that's just really gratifying every day, to know you're really getting it to people that really want it. And then in the afternoons we come to this, again, as this consistent location. It's the trolley line, there's buses here, and this is the real intersection between West Philadelphia, where we live, and Drexel University, and the places that have a little bit more food security, but there's still no grocery store here. So we sell a lot to students and people that aren't maybe what you would think of as food insecure individuals, but people that really are trying to eat healthy and can't, and they really have a hard time. And so we get a lot of student traffic, which feels good to us, and we know we're serving people that need it.
The mobile markets are not money makers for us, and I think sometimes you have to do things that aren't money makers. If the people in a community are food literate, then they will embrace what we're doing.
Our shoot that day was a great time for us to catch up with a good friend, but there were things happening behind the scenes that made it difficult for everyone. 5 years ago, when we came back to celebrate Greensgrow's 15th anniversary, we were so excited. So we showed up on a Friday before the big festival on Saturday. The whole crew was here. We were getting ready. Walked into the office to say hello to a lot of old friends we had made 5 years prior and kept in touch with, only to find out that the star of the show, or the festival, Mary, wasn't going to be able to join us because she was in the hospital. Her battle with cancer had kind of taken a turn for the worse, and it had forced her to go in for some pretty critical treatment. So naturally, she wasn't going to make it. And we understood, and we were certainly disappointed, but we knew that we'd make it work, and we'd tell that story without her, but in a way that lifted her up. So on Saturday when we arrived, we got all set up, and we were looking for our shots, thinking about all the substitution things that we would have to do to cover for the time that we were going to interview Mary. And at the time that we had allocated to interview her, we looked over our shoulder, and guess who was walking up the driveway? Mary. She had convinced the doctors to undo her of all of those things going into her body that were feeding her that medication and that pain relief, dealing with that cancer, because it was so important for her to make it back to the interview to talk to us. And on top of that, you never would have known that she was sick because she had all the energy and spunk that we've ever known from Mary. And that's saying a lot. And yet as soon as the interview was over, she was back to the hospital and hooked up to all those IV lines again. She fought back, and she came back strong. But it was that day, just the example that she set of the fighter that she is, that impressed us so much and just reminded us of how special she really was. But within 3 short years, Mary was gone.
The day after I'd come home from a really stressful vacation, I came back to work only to find out that Mary had died, which promptly sent me into something called Takotsubo's, which is called broken heart syndrome. It sent me to the hospital for a heart attack.
It was a devastating blow to the entire Greensgrove family.
You know, Mary has made me realize that life isn't so serious, not to take it so seriously. Things you have no choice of are going to happen, and you have no way of changing that. And so you go with the flow, and you laugh, you smile. Every day's harder. You know, her favorite saying that she always used to tell me was, Dave, Greensgrove is like pushing a big rock up a big hill. More than likely, the rocks will roll back down next day, but the view for that night is amazing.
At the time when I first came here, my husband had just passed away, so I was looking for something to give me some purpose, and this place gave me a lot of purpose. I woke up every morning thinking, oh good, I get to go to work today.
So her legacy goes way beyond urban agriculture or food. Her legacy is one of a person being intimately in love with their neighborhood.
She cared about this place. I mean, here we are 20 years later. She came to an area that was an unlikely place to have an urban farm and to bring food in.
Yeah.
But she made it work.
No, it was a bad idea to begin with. And that's the first thing Mary would say. She's like, this is a bad idea. Trying to grow food in the middle of a post-industrial neighborhood, not a good idea. But she stuck it out and she did it. And most of the things she did, I think she would classify herself as not a good idea. But she stuck it out and believed in it and made sure that we followed through and made it happen.
And you don't have to go far outside the Greensgrove gates to see the impact Mary had on the larger Kensington community she served as well.
Mary had a huge influence on the neighborhood, I think. Not only greening it, like, she was always willing to give to somebody. Like, neighbors would have an empty pot in front of their house. She would say, hey, let's go put flowers in it for them. They might not be able to afford them, but we're gonna go make it better.
I mean, Greensgrove is definitely great for the neighborhood. I mean, I come here personally with my family, you know, whether it's during the holiday events, there's always something going on, like, you know, Thanksgiving, Halloween, Christmas time, whether it's the fairs or the markets they have on the weekends where you can come and just shop to buy groceries and such like that. I mean, but it's definitely a positive for the neighborhood, there's no doubt about it. I mean, anytime, whether I drive by here or run by here on my daily jog, there's always something going on, whether people are cleaning up or, you know, adding more to place, or just people are coming into the neighborhood to visit and shop, and it's just a great thing for the neighborhood.
Oh, definitely, it's not the same. When I ride by, I go around, I always say hi, Mary, even though, you know, I mean, like, I still feel her, that she's around. I don't see her, but you could feel that that was her life. She loved it. She loved what she was doing. Never heard nothing bad about her. Everybody loved her. You need it, she was there for you. That's how she was with everybody. Mary had a good heart.
When I got married to my husband, I'd been working here for like a year, and we got married on a Sunday, and the bakery would not deliver our cake to our venue in Fairmount Park. And it turned out that Mary just had one of the people who worked here. She said, you will deliver this cake. He drove to South Philadelphia, picked up our wedding cake, drove to our venue, brought it to us, and then came back and worked. So, you know, it was just full of wonderful surprises to work with Mary. She made everything great.
And in true Mary fashion, she had taken steps to ensure that Greensgrow would continue after her, right down to hand-picking her successor. And she went with a familiar face.
I've been at Greensgrow 11 years. I started as the farmer at the very bottom of the totem pole. Mary always said I would take over, and I always told her no, and then yeah, here we are. She got her way, as we know. She always got her way. The first 2 years was just Mary yelling at me every day, but I tell you, I never wanted to come into work being yelled at by anyone else. The fundamental thing was Mary had really high standards. Not only had she put her blood, sweat, and tears into this place for 10 years before I even got there, right? Things and stories that I would never know, I'd hear snippets of, but I didn't know the journey that had gone there. But this was her baby, this was her thing. She felt fiercely like she wanted to protect it. And so that yelling really came out of a sense of love and stewardship for this project that is Greensgrow. And so those high standards were not only about her, but I think about making sure that everyone came behind her, knew what was expected of Greensgrow even when she was gone. If there's one thing that I find myself challenging to recreate, it's that unique persona. That's not something I can't be Mary, and I can't try to be Mary. And I think that's what's challenging every day is how do you bring your own unique role to this organization that was built around one person. Greensgrow is Mary and was Mary and will always be Mary to some degree. So how do we make sure we hold that and center that while still allowing the farm to grow and develop and innovate and keep changing to reflect the city as it changes, the neighborhood as it changes, and its staff as we take on new roles here. The thing that I always carry around with me that Mary really instilled in all of us is that Greensgrow has to serve everyone in this community. Everyone has to find value in what we're doing here. And so we have a lot of programs, sometimes too many programs, but everyone is a gateway for a different type of person, a different type of family to come in and find a reason why Greensgrow exists in their community. I have a what would Mary do above, under her picture in my office. And that's not a what will Mary do every day, but how would Mary go about thinking about this? What would Mary be looking to the future and making sure that Greensgrow is meeting those standards and continuing our mission and staying true to ourselves and, again, our identity in this neighborhood.
The Kensington neighborhood is a fundamental part of the DNA of Mary's Greensgrow farm. It's so ideally tailored to this specific community that you could never pick it up and just put it somewhere else. But that's not to say you couldn't start another Greensgrow in a new neighborhood and grow it organically, from scratch, to fit that community, just as precisely. And that was the first major challenge Ryan took on as Greensgrow's new executive director. This is so cool.
I know, I'm glad to have you. It's been a long time.
Greensgrow West. So tell me about the property. How did you find this place?
This is a long time coming. So, I lived in West Philly for 20 years. So I think this is always capturing my desire to work closer to home. So I've been pressuring Mary for a long time. We really should be in West Philly. And it was always Mary's dream, I think, to replicate, to say that this wasn't a flash in the pan.
Yep.
That Greensgrow is something that has relevance to every neighborhood.
So I'm sure the neighbors love having you here.
Definitely. I think this neighborhood, unlike Kensington, which is an industrial neighborhood, there's not only yard space. West Philly is very green. There's lots of opportunities here, but they didn't have the resources, not even a box store for them to get plants. So as I said, this is something that the neighborhood was asking for, and Greensgrow was able to fill a void and bring our experience and our wonderful mix of plants and people to this neighborhood and figure out how we can add value. How does Greensgrow in West Philly look different than Greensgrow in Kensington? And that's a really interesting thing about what we're trying to do here.
So here we are in this super cool urban location. How in the heck did you score this place?
We actually just did a pop-up down the street. So there was a longtime business owner in the neighborhood. His bar had burned down in a tragic fire, and the land was sitting vacant, and he hated seeing that. He wanted to see something green and vibrant come in and fill in the corridor. So we went there for 2 years, and it did so amazingly well. It really gave us the confidence and the experience to say, all right, here we can show the city, we know what we're doing. And now we're here, and it's been, it still changes every day. I think we're still getting the lay of the land, right? There's a permaculture principle of you have to spend a year in a place to really understand it.
Right. Well, I know Mary would have been really excited because it was always her dream to replicate GreensGrow, and this happened just after she passed.
Well, yeah, I mean, she got a chance to see it. I had some funny meetings here with kicking rocks, and poking around the site. Honestly, she was very hands-off. I think that's what I always loved about Mary. She, trusted my instinct, trusted my vision, and kind of let me go. Sometimes I wish I had more support from her, but I think she really understood that if this was going to succeed, it had to have a life beyond her, and so she couldn't really micromanage it. But the organization was always called GreensGrow Philadelphia Project. The idea being that this was just one out of a series of how this idea would spread across the country. And so I don't know if you ever thought it would spread inside Philadelphia first, but it's definitely been a nice stepping stone to I think what we see as the future, which is, GreensGrows popping up all over. Taking these wonderful sites that we create and how do we make them accessible and usable by others. And so we've done farm dinners here, we did movie nights, we did a whole thing we did dog washes one Saturday. That's one of the great things about being on a commercial corridor. One of the great assets that we were looking for in trying replicating is being accessible on a public transit line in the middle of a neighborhood in a way that Kinston honestly wasn't. When that farm was started, it was a hydroponic lettuce farm. It didn't matter where it was. And so now we built a community around there, but here we're walking into a community, and part of that is listening and figuring out what are the latent needs here, what are the understandings, how do people want to use the space to achieve their own vision. And a lot of that is just time and patience in figuring that out.
Right, and providing a beautiful green space and lots of opportunity to take some of this nature back home with them, right? No matter where they live.
What I like to say is, we put the people in gardens. So it's one thing to have a community garden that you can enjoy from the outside. It's another to have a space like this you can walk in and talk to someone about what's going on, talk to something about how you're going to take physically, and the idea is, right, the idea farm back to your block and replicate it in a small way. And so a lot of what we do is just find ways to welcome people into the site and make it their own in a small ways. It's nice, we get people all the time that walk around and say, I can tell you're here because I walk around the neighborhood and I see flowers in people's yards. And so you can actually have a visual impact and a material impact on the neighborhood around us, and that's really powerful.
I love that. You're doing a good thing, Ryan. GreensGrow really is a special place, not just for us on the Growing a Greener World team, and not just for the Philadelphians who live and work nearby, but also for the countless others whose lives have all been made a little brighter because of Mary Seton Corboy's incredible vision and tireless mission with this place. And while it is hard to walk around this place and not see my friend Mary, the truth is I do see her in every lovingly cared for plant, in every staff member's smiling face, and in all the friendly handshakes from friends and neighbors that Mary left behind, and in all the work that she started that continues to spread. Make no mistake, Mary is still here, and Mary is still very much growing a greener world. If you'd like to go back and watch our very first episode, our pilot that we filmed right here at GreensGrow, or when we return for the 15th anniversary, you can do that on our website under the show notes for this episode. And the website address is the same as our show name. It's growingagreenerworld.com. Thanks for joining us, everybody. I'm Joe Lample, and we'll see you back here next time for more Growing a Greener World. I'm Joe Lample. When I created Growing a Greener World, I had one goal: to tell stories of everyday people, innovators, entrepreneurs, forward-thinking leaders who are all, in ways both big and small, dedicated to organic gardening and farming, lightening our footprint, conserving vital resources, protecting natural habitats, making a tangible difference for us all. They're real, they're passionate, they're all around us. They're the game changers who are literally growing a greener world and inspiring the rest of us to do the same. Growing a Greener World It's more than a movement, it's our mission. The best gardens have a real sense of place about them. Now sure, you could take Midwestern prairie grasses and grow them in the Deep South, or you could take a palm tree and plant it in Minnesota, or take a desert cactus and make it the focal point of your Cape Cod landscape, at least in the summertime. But the best gardens are the ones that tell you, simply by the plants that fill the space, exactly where you are in the world. And if ever there were a place, one place, that can show you the true beauty of native plants in their natural surroundings, and then inspire you to be conservators of the natural habitat and inform you about all the benefits of native plants, it's here, Mount Cuba Center, located just 40 miles southwest of downtown Philadelphia. With 1,100 acres nearly and a focus on native plants under their care, Mount Cuba Center truly is a place for conservation, education, scientific research, and most of all, inspiration. Some come to Mount Cuba Center simply to take a stroll through the beautiful and historic gardens. Some take part in continuing education classes with gardening topics like pruning trees, propagating plants, and integrated pest management. Conservation topics like learning about pollinators and designing mini ecosystems. Arts and crafts sessions like botanical drawing, making paper, and creating leaf castings. Or wellness classes that include nature walks, yoga, and Tai Chi. There's even a 12-week summer internship program and fellowship opportunities for field research. It's a dizzying array of outreach programs, all designed to attract thousands of visitors each year to this northernmost corner of the state of Delaware. But it all started in the 1930s as the private residential garden of one of the country's most well-known families.
So at its origins, Mount Cuba Center was the home of the Copeland family. Mr. Lamont DuPont Copeland was a scion of the DuPont family, industrialists, innovators, and among the wealthiest people in America during the early 20th century. And he and his wife, Pamela Copeland, moved to this area that then was really in the countryside outside of Wilmington to set up their new home and soon thereafter their gardens. They developed formal gardens around the house, and then as they acquired more property, began to expand down the hillside. But along the way, a couple things happened. One is Mrs. Copeland's passion for native plants began to influence the evolution of the gardens more and more. Mrs. Copeland grew up in Litchfield, Connecticut, and as I understand it, spent hours during her childhood walking in the woods and the fields and getting to know the native wildflowers there. And when she came down to this area, it was a time of increasing development throughout the United States, and she became concerned about people damaging the environment and despoiling these wonderful natural resources that we had. And so she wanted people to connect with nature more closely and to appreciate how special our native flora is.
That hope for people to connect with nature more closely led to the second thing that happened. The Copelands decided to share their gardens with the public. Shortly after Mrs. Copeland's passing in 2001, their dream was fully realized with the opening of the estate grounds at Mount Cuba Center. Jeff Downing is now the executive director.
Mrs. Copeland gave us what has become the vision statement of the organization. We called it our founding intention. She said, I want this to be a place where people will learn to appreciate our native plants and to see how these plants can enrich their lives so that they, in turn, will become conservators of our natural habitats. And that's a really important thing because the Copelands didn't just want this to be a pretty place to go. They had a very specific intention that Mount Cuba be a place where we inspire people, the community, to then go home and consider thinking differently about their own landscape practices so that they might garden more in harmony with nature's systems. That's a tricky thing to do, but it's something we're committed to trying to do. So at every step of the way, we try to analytically assess if we're following through on inspiration if we're following through on motivating people to go home and actually take action, and if all of that running around actually adds up to something measurable, valuable to the environment.
That's a tall order for any garden to achieve, even one that's 1,100 acres. It's up to Director of Horticulture Travis Beck to bring Pamela Copeland's vision to life for a new generation of gardeners. So walking down these paths, are these the ones Mrs. Copeland would have actually put in place as we see them, or did you guys do this after the fact?
This is really Mrs. Copeland's original work carried out, and we've just preserved it. She was involved in laying out the rocks for this wall here, and in, I'm sure, selecting the locations for these trees, which have matured wonderfully in the intervening years.
It's really kind of neat to put yourself in her position and imagine that you're her walking down her garden.
Absolutely, and I think that's part of the experience we want our visitors to have, is that this is still an intimate place where you get that up-close experience of native plants.
Right. Native plants are exactly what the name says, plant life that's naturally indigenous to a specific region over sometimes thousands of years or more. But they're also the plants that are sometimes misunderstood or misinterpreted, and they're the ones that we think are weedy or boring, and they get dug up or ripped out to make room for the plants that we want to see growing there. But gardeners often talk about the right plant for the right place. But with native plants and their natural disease resistance and longevity and hardiness, well, that's Mother Nature's perfect example of what she says is the right plant for the right place. But thankfully, natives are making a comeback with home gardeners and places like Mount Cuba Center, who are recognizing the value of native plants in the home landscape and for growing a greener world.
Well, native plants, in the simplest terms, are the plants that belong in any environment. They're the plants that evolved with the climate and the geology of any area. So when we use native plants, we get all the advantages of that adaptation. We also get plants that create a sense of place and make us feel like our home landscape that we're designing and manages fits into the larger natural environment and connects to it in some way. And those connections aren't merely symbolic, but they're very real for the bees, the butterflies, the birds that all use the natural environments and the built landscape for their habitat. Native plants are the foundation of the food web. They feed the insects that feed the birds and other organisms, and we need them in order to have a healthy ecosystem. Native plants connect us to the deep history of this place. They show us what was here before, and they show us what wants to be here in a very real way. We have a wonderful video of Mrs. Copeland touring the gardens with Dick Leidy, who is the former director here. And as they walk along the dogwood path next to the moss bank, he prompts her to reflect on how it was that they created that area, noting that it was one of the more difficult places in the garden to figure out what to get to grow there. And she said, because it was difficult, we took our time, we waited to see what would come in here on its own, and then that gave us the cues we needed to add, to edit, to let it evolve, based on really what wanted to grow in those conditions. And that's really what Mount Cuba is telling us all that we should be doing in our gardening, to observe how nature operates, to take our time to make decisions, and to cooperate with the natural processes of our environment.
Travis, what are the arguments that you most often hear for people that aren't really keen on using native plants in the landscape?
I continue to hear people say that native plants are messy, to which I say, look at our gardens. You can lay out a beautiful planting design with native plants, mass them, repeat the colors, have contrasting foliage, throw in a little structure with your trees and shrubs, add a specimen, and boom, you've got a beautiful garden. Sure, it's loose, sure, it's naturalistic, but it's not messy.
All right. Travis, as we walk these paths, I am so taken aback by the masses of trillium here. You really don't see that anywhere else. What's up with that?
You don't anymore. With the forest being fragmented and the explosion in our deer population, these plants are really hard to find in the wild.
Yeah.
which is why it's so important that we have them here, both to conserve them and also to show them to the public so they can understand what should be there and what could be there.
And it's a great opportunity for them to plant more to really kind of replicate this in the home garden.
Absolutely. And Trillium is not a beginner plant, but if you can pull it off, then you know you're initiated in the world of native plant gardening.
What a great surprise in spring, though, as you're walking along and you see those Trillium coming up from the ground in your forest floor of your own yard.
It's the most wonderful feeling.
Yeah, I love that. To the novice, it may look lazy to just let Mother Nature do whatever she wants and call it native. Well, it's not quite that hands-off, and Travis and his staff at Mount Cuba are very skilled in a process they call editing, fine-tuning what grows naturally to create a show-stopping display. And while Mount Cuba employs more gardeners per acre than most public gardens do, taking a deliberately native approach to your landscape will typically lower your overall maintenance and cut way down on the least enjoyable part of yard work.
When the leaves fall from the trees, we let them stay on the ground, underneath those trees where they break down. One of my favorite things about working at Mount Cuba is that when you find a stick on the path, you just take it, break it up, and throw it back in the bed. And that stick is going to decompose and contribute to the litter on the forest floor. When a tree dies here, we might not take it all the way down to the ground. We might leave a snag, and that snag becomes home for woodpeckers, for squirrels that play their own role in this garden. And when we do have to take a plant down to the ground, a large tree, we usually don't take out the stump. We leave that stump to decompose in place. And that becomes, again, its own little niche environment for a different set of fungi, insects, and other animals. And by having this diversity of woody debris from the large to the small and the leaves on the forest floor, we're mimicking a natural forest environment, and that's the habitat in which most of our native forest floor plants grow, and they're happier here and healthier for that. Anyone can do what we do here at Mount Cuba. You have to get to know the place that you live and care for, understand the conditions that are there, take your time to try things out, see what succeeds, see what fails, take inspiration from natural habitats that you may visit, and from gardens like these. And if you can do all of that and put it together, you too can work with the natural processes of your area and have a successful garden that doesn't care for itself, but that is a lot of fun to care for.
As I look into this bed, that's a clear example of how you encourage dense planting to sort of shade out those weeds, right?
It absolutely is. In this bed we have a variety of spreading plants like the blue woodland phlox here, and self-sowing plants like the red columbines, and these just fill in the entire space. In fact, just earlier this week we had our gardeners and a group of volunteers in editing out some of the woodland sedum that you see there.
Which is a good plant, except when it's out of place, then it's technically a weed, right?
That's right. Luckily the volunteers got to take some pieces home.
That's a good one. Now that's a weed I'd be happy to take home.
Our gardens at Mount Cuba really show you how you can create a three-dimensional landscape. It's not about turf and trees, it's not about mulch and flowers, it's about having turf and trees and mulch and flowers and shrubs and bees and slugs and everything growing together on top of one another with each other. And in a way, that's the most fun part of gardening. You're not weeding, you're not watering, you're going through and saying, hey, this plant was more successful than I thought. It's spread, it's taking over. I'm gonna take some of it out of this area. Maybe I'll move it over here, maybe I'll give it to my friends, maybe I'll just compost it. Or here's a spot that needs something. What is nearby that seems to be working that I can bring in? And that's very much how our gardens have developed over time, through generations of gardeners observing what's working and making those small changes day after day.
Some of those small changes might include different plant varieties. And yes, even in the world of natives, there can be dozens of varieties of the same plant. Part of the extensive study going on at Mount Cuba includes learning as much as possible about plants that many people, even experienced, lifelong gardeners, sometimes take for granted. George Coombs is the manager of Horticulture Research. So George, we're standing in your domain. These are the trial gardens here. Tell me about the purpose of this. What are we doing here?
Really, I kind of like to tell people that this is like consumer reports for plants, trying to make recommendations for gardeners so that they'll be successful when they plant these things at their house.
And of course, these are native plant varieties. You're trialing these over what, a 3-year period?
3 years usually. We're looking to see how they perform over the long term, you know, multiple seasons, multiple kind of weather variations and that sort of thing.
Right. So on average, how many plants or varieties or cultivars of a typical plant are you doing?
It really just depends on the group. Right now we're standing in our coneflower trial. We've got over 80 different kinds of coneflowers, so that's kind of one of our larger ones. Amsonia, for example, we only have about 20, so it just really depends.
Okay. Now you're not the only public garden or university or institution doing plant trials, but you are one of the only ones or the only one looking at certain things on those plants in addition to overall performance.
Yeah, being focused on native plants, we're really interested in the ecological value that they provide. And so one of the things that we've been doing over the past few years is monitoring pollinator visits and seeing if there are certain cultivars or certain species that are getting more pollinator activity than others. So that way, if you're looking to build a pollinator garden, you know, we can kind of point you to the right direction.
And so from an ecological standpoint, you're also looking for drought tolerance and overall performance, disease resistance, things like that?
Yep. How long they bloom, you know, their sturdiness of their habit, all the things that gardeners care about, just kind of tacking on that ecological component.
And then how do you get the word out on that?
We create these reports that really kind of summarize the top performers for each trial. We also kind of put even more in-depth information onto our website. So gardeners can kind of read about what performs best, get to learn how to, you know, some gardening tips with each plant. And kind of if you want to deep dive into a particular cultivar, you can kind of dial into our website further.
Well, George, this is a nice trial, the Amsonia trial, the only one in bloom at the moment. So for visitors, I'm sure they like to see this one. Tell me more about what's going on here.
Yeah, we've got about 20 different kinds of Amsonia, and we're really just kind of looking to explore which species do what and kind of evaluate their overall performance. This trial is actually in its 4th year, so we're looking to see which species you know, really kind of do the best here.
So you said 4th year, right?
I did, which is a little different than what we normally do, but these plants are slower to mature, so we really have to kind of give them the extra time.
Okay, so in 4 years, have you found any major ahas on these?
Actually, we have. There's a cultivar that's commonly promoted as a great native plant called Amsonia blue ice, which we found is not really a native. We've been growing it kind of next to Amsonia orientalis, which is native to Turkey. And they're basically the same plant. They bloom at the same time, have the same growth habit, get the same disease in the summertime, which nobody else gets. So there's really no reason to think that they're anything different.
So even though it has a lot of great value on its own merit, it's nice to also know for those real native plant enthusiasts that it's technically not a native to this area.
Yep. Yeah.
But for all the splendor that Mount Cuba puts on display, and for all the education they do about native plants, I wondered if the concept was really taking off in the real world. Just down the road from Mount Cuba, at Gateway Garden Center, owner Peg Castorani believes the native movement is real and growing. You've been here 35 years, right? So you've seen a lot of transition from how it used to be to how it is now and where it's going. Tell me a little bit about the evolution that you've noticed recently as it relates to native plants.
Well, people come in with a knowledge of native plants already. So we're in a very horticulturally hot spot here. So we're very fortunate that our customers are very well educated.
So being so close to Mount Cuba clearly has a little bit of an advantage for you because as we just heard, you know, some of your customers are showing up here after being inspired from what they see at Mount Cuba, and you create a great opportunity for them to pick up plants here. So that has to help. But you're telling me that a lot of your customers, or a good percentage of them, are coming in on their own just asking for natives, whether they've been to Mount Cuba or not. That's kind of a turning point, finally.
Absolutely. I don't know how it happens, but you know there's that flip moment where it finally reaches sort of a mainstream culture for gardeners,
yeah,
and we're thrilled.
As backwards as it may sound, plants that are native to a geographic region are sometimes the hardest to find locally. Big box stores, for example, sell lots of different plant varieties, but very few are native, or at least not labeled as such. So where do you go if you want to add some native plants to your landscape or garden? Well, you've heard me beat this drum many times before, but I'm doing it once again, and that's your neighborhood independent garden center. Not only do they have lots of native varieties, but they're staffed with plenty of people who are passionate about natives too. Plus, by a simple conversation, a lot of times they'll carry those varieties that you're looking for. So while the megastores may be a great go-to source for a lot of things, when it comes to gardening with natives, well, that takes a different mindset, which usually requires a nursery that's willing to think differently about their plants that they carry too. At Mount Cuba, encouraging that different mindset about the plant life around us is ultimately what it's all about. The phrase they use is gardening on a higher level.
The Copelands wanted this to be not just a public garden, but a garden that inspires people to go home and think differently about how they take care of their own home landscapes. So gardening on a higher level is all about us trying to inspire people and then motivate them to go home and think about native plants and environmentally beneficial gardening. It's an important thing to figure out whether people are going home and taking the actions that we're hoping to motivate. And so we have to find ways to keep in touch with people after they leave here. We give away something like 10,000 plants a year. We call it or at least I call it, the potato chip marketing approach of, I dare you to plant just one.
We want this to be a garden that makes you reflect a little bit on where we stand in nature, what role we can play in the larger environment. And so we think of Mount Cuba's gardens as being the place where inspiration begins. And inspiration is the first part of our mission. Once you're inspired, once you're engaged with this place, then there's so much more you can do. You can take a class here, you can become a volunteer here, you can go out into your own community and get involved in how the landscape is cared for there, or conservation issues that may be coming up. And that's the trajectory that we would ideally like everyone who comes to Mount Cuba to go on. If you're just here and have a beautiful day, that's okay too.
One walk around this place and it's easy to see that Mother Nature was onto something when she pulled together such a diverse plant palette, one that's on display throughout the eastern United States. But through the years, with a lot of hard work and dedication, the best of the best have been curated right here at Mount Cuba Center, and where all of these native plants on display can provide ideas and inspiration for your own home landscape. And if you'd like to learn more about native plants or Mount Cuba Center, you can do that on our website under the show notes for this episode. The website address, that's the same as our show name. It's growingagreenerworld.com. Thanks for joining us, everybody. I'm Joe Lample, and we'll see you back here next time for more Growing a Greener World.